Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where any combination of Dr. Ross, Christian, and Brian host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. Today's topic is rethinking public transportation. Our guest is Rudy Solo, who is the Forbes transportation contributor and podcast co-host for Good is in the Details. Rudy is also a Georgetown law graduate and an infrastructure finance attorney at Nixon Peabody LLP, representing government entities and financial institutions in financing transportation systems and other infrastructure. Enjoy today's show.
Rudy, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I really enjoyed your episode on Good is in the Details podcast, and I feel like we could have gone on even longer about my passion for transportation, but I stopped myself because, transportation is not a focus of that podcast, but I was really honored that you wanted to talk more about it.
I do. And apropos, for listeners, obviously we pre-record these and we had to move it back 15 minutes because Rudy himself is a modern husband and needed to take his kids to camp. So I'm really happy that a modern husband who has an incredible professional background was able to join us today. Christian is on vacation, so it's Dr. Ross and I. And we want to dive straight into really, understanding that, the future of transportation is now. And a lot of people are trying to figure out how to plan for the future and what are they going to do for themselves and their family as it pertains to transportation. And specific to this, like, do you buck up and spend more for electric or gas cars? But before we get into that, we would love to know why you're so passionate about transportation.
Yeah, great question. And it wasn't immediately obvious to me where the passion started until I had to do something that was extremely difficult, which was give the eulogy at my grandmother's wedding. And It was in writing up that eulogy where a lot of crossroads and passions of my life became absolutely clear. So from that it's tragic because my grandmother was so important to me, yet she was also in her late 90s and she lived a difficult but, good life. It was then that I realized it is actually the passion stems from my grandmother, who immigrated here when she was in her 50s, didn't speak English very well. And we first lived in downtown Los Angeles, which had, back then, it was just buses. There were no trains back then. But then we moved to North Orange County, which is not very well known for being transit friendly. However, my grandmother figured out how to use the buses in North Orange County. And because she lived with us and because, she partially raised us, I pretty much grew up on buses with my grandmother. We took the buses everywhere. She taught me how to take the bus to her favorite mall. She taught me how to walk up to 3 miles because she couldn't drive, right? Her English wasn't that great. She taught herself how to speak English by watching The Price is Right and The Young and the Restless, which pretty much meant I grew up learning how to speak English, watching The Price is Right and The Young and the Restless. And, she just taught me you don't need a car in this country. Now, in her country, I don't even really think, she came over from Jordan. And I don't really even think there's much public transportation there now. And there certainly wasn't back then. But they used to live, she lived in Amman, the big city where you just kind of walk everywhere and everything's around you. And you rely upon people for rides. And traditionally women didn't drive back then. So it's just, she came here, she didn't learn how to drive. She learned public transportation and she instilled that in me. And I used public transportation for most of my life until I got a car when I was 16. Then, became a passionate driver, didn't use public transportation at all. And then I went to UCLA, didn't really have a car, started walking and using the UCLA buses, and then went to Georgetown for law school, did not have a car, really got introduced to a mass transit system and absolutely fell in love with mass transit. The fact that you can go from completely different cities, completely different states, right? Because it's DC, Maryland, Virginia, et cetera, without a car was like so foreign to me. I returned back to Orange County for my first job, and there were no train options. I studied bus options, wasn't able to really use them. But once I made the move to another law firm in downtown Los Angeles, I started to make public transportation eventually a part of my daily commute. And if it wasn't for me using public transportation, there would be no way that I would be able to do all of the things that I do. Like we can get into it more on this episode, but truly the crux of my multifaceted personality and interests is because I've learned to I've learned to use public transportation to my advantage.
Give us an example. And as, by the way, before you dive into that, I need to echo your sentiments because, I grew up in a small rural town. So, public transportation was super foreign to me. But when I've taken a number of trips to Europe where public transportation is very sophisticated, so much so where, a lot of people don't have cars. They don't have to, and which is such an expense saver. You don't have to pay for gas or electric, and you don't have to pay for car insurance, on and on. And, they have bicycles. And then, whenever I fly into a big city, particularly DC for work, you could take the public transportation anywhere, and it's so convenient. So anyhow, give me an example of how it's impacted your life and your multifaceted approach to all the different things you do.
Yeah. Once I moved to a community where I could either walk to a very, very nice commuter bus, which actually has Wi-Fi. I could either walk to downtown Manhattan Beach, or I could drive my car to a train station, leave my car there, take the train in, and take the bus home. Once I made that a part of my daily commute. Now, granted, this was pre-COVID. We'll talk about post-COVID because that's very relevant to the questions that you've asked me and to the future of transportation. But prior to COVID, I primarily commuted via public transportation. That was like 5 days a week. I got back 2 hours of my day. I delegated the driving to somebody else. Now, you remember at the very end of our Good as in the Details podcast episode, I focused on the power of delegation in a marriage. Well, there's also the power of delegation as an individual. I delegated the driving to somebody else, i.e., the city of Los Angeles, LA County Metro, et cetera, and I got 2 hours back of my day where, because of the power of a smartphone, I decided to educate myself in various passions, in the creative passions. I wound up taking classes online for screenwriting for UCLA Extension. I wound up getting my screenwriting, feature film writing certificate through UCLA. I wound up taking some speaking classes. I wound up taking some other types of classes literally right on my phone because because, like I said, there's Wi-Fi on these buses, and was able to use my smartphone. And that's actually how I used to write my Forbes articles. Used to be right on public transportation, which was perfect, right? Here I am advocating for a rethinking of transportation, and I was actually doing that. Now, the amount of articles that I've been able to publish on Forbes has plummeted as a result of the pandemic. Because why? I don't go into the office as much anymore. When I do go into the office, I try to use public transportation. It's just things are different now. The working from home movement, the pandemic, it really has had an impact on everyone's life, even hardcore advocates like myself of using public transportation. It has changed me. And that's why if you read any articles out there about the state of public transportation in the United States today, you're going to hear something about the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff is if your public transportation system is reliant upon ticket fares in order to maintain and operate that system, which is in my parlance known as fare box revenues, you got a big problem. Why? Because we're barely at 70% of the riders prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's just not getting better. So we've got a crisis in the United States today for public transportation, and I hate to admit the fact that I'm a part of that too. I don't use public transportation as much as I used to because I'm just not going into the office as much.
Yeah. I know Brian brought up even just the fact of like how Europe's public transportation is so great. And I got to witness this past summer teaching in Germany, and just flying in and going into this small town that I was teaching in. I mean, I was able to sit with a colleague and just travel across on the train, and we planned out a book chapter together. We planned out some other research and some course materials. And then every morning we got to ride the bus to the university and have a discussion and talk and plan out all the things that we wanted to do that day. Like, it was actually very productive. And I come back here and now I'm just driving my car into work because there is no bus system, to get into the university here. So I think we're missing a lot of that.
Yeah, and I call that smart multitasking, right?
Yeah.
There's such a negative connotation around multitasking, where okay, yeah, all right, most multitasking is probably terrible for you, but if you reframe your multitasking, right, if you can accomplish 2 to 3 things all at the same time, and you can more or less give as much attention as humanly possible as you're doing that smart multitasking. Here, you're commuting to work. You have to commute to work, whether that's to the university or me to downtown. Why is it that you have to drive? Why can't somebody else do that for you? And you can then, maybe you could check your work emails, so you're working, but when you spend 5 to 10 minutes checking your work emails, then maybe you can read an article. Then maybe you can write an article. Then maybe you could take a class online. It's just all about where in our 24 hours can you get multiple things done at the same time without taking away the power of the focus there. And transportation is the number one way I believe people can get more time back in their day. It's just all about what opportunities are there. Now, in rural areas, it's not great, right? It's just, unfortunately, it's not great. There are programs out there to try to roll out better transportation programs. The federal government is focused on it. It just all comes down to use, finance, brain damage. I mean, inflation has impacted projects. The pandemic and the supply chain issues have impacted projects. There are major issues. There are major transportation gaps in this country, and so I really like working with and talking with new transportation technology companies to try to fill in those gaps where perhaps there isn't currently a public transportation option, but maybe there's a company out there, a private company or some other option that can get you to a service that works kind of well. And I think that's going to be one of the tenets of the future of transportation, leveraging technology to fill in those gaps.
So you mentioned that you've written a lot of articles for Forbes. Can you talk about what article that you've written has been your favorite and why?
It's interesting. The most popular article that I wrote was one of the very first ones about COVID-19 and its potential impact on the future of transportation. And in that, I kind of laid out 5 possible impacts that COVID-19 will possibly have on the future of transportation. I wouldn't say that was necessarily my favorite. It was my most popular one. Okay. I actually think it's interesting you should ask that question. I actually just recently re-reviewed an article in that I'm doing a 3-year look back at that article. The title of that article, and it was one of the editor's picks, which is a nice thing to get. I've gotten 3 editor pick articles in the past, and it's called "Has COVID-19 and its accelerated work from home experiment permanently changed the future of cities?" Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the answer to that question, when I asked it exactly 3 years ago in July 2020, is yes. There are numerous articles out there. There are numerous things that are occurring in cities right now that COVID-19 has, as I said, accelerated. There already were things that were occurring that were eventually this was going to happen. They just needed a quote unquote black swan event to kind of accelerate everything. And for example, San Francisco, there's many articles about how the commercial real estate in San Francisco, the value of it has plummeted as a result of people working from home and people leaving San Francisco. There are other cities out there as well. I don't mean to pick on San Francisco. It's one of my favorite cities. I call it my second favorite city. But if you read the article, I actually talk about how, the true thing that the true major difference between the COVID-19 pandemic and the Spanish flu pandemic back in 1919, why didn't that pandemic have a major impact on cities? Well, because the internet The internet was actually the thing that allows us to have this conversation. I'm in LA. You guys are all across the country. It is the internet, but the internet and broadband expansion and just technology and the betterment of fiber optics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the COVID-19 pandemic. Everybody being forced to work from home. Companies realizing actually we can get a lot done from home. Whether or not the future of that and the how that's going to be better for a company, I think that'll still be played out in the future. But things might have permanently changed for cities. I mean, I'm watching commercial real estate. There's a lot of things happening right now that really can change things, that will change the way we are viewing how we live, how we work, how we commute. And that's probably my favorite article. In fact, I'm writing a look back article right now on like kind of playing out how that article, kind of fortunately or unfortunately kind of predicted everything that's happening today. One of my other favorite ones that I've written is on flying cars. I know people used to, hey, Rudy, you're crazy, future flying car. Turns out it's here. I mean, you can go on to YouTube. If you're on LinkedIn, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I follow a lot of the quote unquote flying car companies, and they're testing. And what kind of an impact is that going to have on the future of cities? What's the kind of impact that's going to have on the future of community? What's that going to have on the future of infrastructure? And that was a really good article too, because I kind of laid out an action plan for state and local governments to prepare for the future of flying cars. So those are two interesting ones that I'm pretty proud of.
A quick moment of appreciation for our sponsor, Money Marriage University, who delivers self-paced online courses for couples designed by national therapy and financial planning experts. Money Marriage U experts understand how to help couples hurting from arguments and tension around money. Money Marriage U offers a wide variety of online courses at different price points. Take your first step toward healing your pain by visiting moneymarriageuniversity.com. Once again, you can learn more at moneymarriageuniversity.com. Now back to the show.
One of the things that we have to do as modern husbands, or just, anybody who's thinking about purchasing a car, is you have to look into the future now, because we all know that the car buying market's still kind of wacky because of COVID, inflationary pressures that derived primarily in the car market from supply chain issues. However, we went through this recently, and I have a unique circumstance where I live in Peachtree City, where there are 100 miles of golf cart paths. So, when you go to the high school parking lot, there are more golf carts in that parking lot than there are cars. And when we moved here initially, I thought it was, some sort of novelty. And a buddy of mine who lives here is like, look, you have to get one. And we go everywhere. We go grocery shopping on the golf cart. And what's happened is that we don't drive our cars nearly as much. And so now we're rethinking, do we need an additional car for, one of our children? Because we've got multiple kids. And so that factored into it. But what really was difficult to do was to figure out, do you buy, a $10,000 used gas car, or at what point do you buy more electric? So I full disclosure, I have the bare bone minimum Tesla Model 3. And when I bought it, my wife was frustrated to a certain degree. I bought it in 2019. And just last week, she told me, you shouldn't have listened to me. You should have just bought two, because it's so nice to we just don't have any maintenance. That's the other, it's not just gas, it's just maintenance. So anyhow, when you're going through this process of deciding what to buy next, walk us through that process, and feel free to add in. And I just came up with this idea as you were talking about time management, autonomous cars, because Tesla's close. And I know they have full driving, and it's in beta, but they're really close to getting it to the point where you can just sit back and it takes you to work downtown and back. What's that process look like?
Yeah, I have got a lot of thoughts on autonomous vehicles. In fact, dare I say, a third of my articles on Forbes are on autonomous vehicles, and
Okay.
I have very strong beliefs that people in the industry don't like some of my beliefs. Unfortunately, I'm right, and that's been proven out. I'll talk about that in a second. And I've been writing about that for almost 10 years now. I have been writing about what's missing in the future of autonomous vehicles. But to answer your questions, I'll get very personal. I have an old gas car. I have a 2009 Lexus RX 350 that my wife and I bought used when we were in New York City because we needed a car for her hospital residency. She's a surgeon. She did surgical residency in New York City, and then she got her fellowship in Chicago. You need a car as a surgeon, right? Because if you're going to get called in for an emergency, got to get there. I still have that car. Now, that car has about 140,000 miles on it, and it's almost 15 years old. And those particular types of Lexuses are well known to last until the 200s or 300,000 miles. I mean, my parents have had...
That warms my heart, Rudy. I am somebody who sees a car as a utility, and just if you can get 300,000 miles of it, go ahead. Sorry, you just warmed my heart.
No, unfortunately, that car will not get 200 to 300,000 because it has some, as a result of some crazy winter storms that we've had here in California, and we go to Lake Tahoe a lot, and there was massive amounts of snow. There's been some damage to the headlights, where in order to replace it, it would literally be half of the used Blue Book value of the car. Now, most of the headlights still work. It's just one of them is out. And so I just don't drive that car at night, right? I'll take Uber, or we also have a Prius we have another car here. We have somebody that helps out with the kids, and we have a Prius. So I'll use the Prius at night if I need to. Eventually, within the next year, I'm going to have to do this analysis of what is going to be my next car if I get one. There are some very exciting things happening in Los Angeles right now, which will also be a part of that look back article. Our metro system is expanding very well. We are preparing for the Olympics that are coming here in 2028.
Oh yeah,
and there are a lot of train lines that have been opened up. We just recently opened up this thing called the Regional Connector, which makes it so you don't have to change a lot of trains. And I live just 1.8 miles from the end of the Green Line. And there's electric bike options, there's electric scooter options. I can run to the train station. And so the analysis is going to come down to, do I really need a new car? We already have, right now we have 3 cars, assuming the Lexus dies, right? We have that Prius that we use for the kids, and my wife has her car that she needs for her work. Like, will I need a new car? Can I just rely upon public transportation and an electric bike option of some kind? And maybe using Uber or, some kind of option. I don't know. Now, if I do buy a car, it will be an electric car. Why? Because charging stations are starting to get built. I mean, I'm working on some very unique financings as an infrastructure finance attorney on new charging stations here in California. But the bottom line is, as a part of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, there's supposed to be 500,000 new charging stations being built across the United States by 2030. The future is electric. The present is electric. So my next car will be electric. We already have solar on our house, so that's not even a factor as far as electricity bills. But at some point, either I or my wife will get an electric car. Now, to answer your question about autonomous vehicles, I see that we have 8 minutes left, and I hope to answer this question within eight minutes, but I'll just give you the very simple answer. The simple answer is our infrastructure is not ready for autonomous vehicles.
Okay.
Our streets and our roads and our mentalities are not ready for AVs. Okay. Why? The real benefit, you can go onto YouTube. You can go on YouTube for like the last 15 years and go watch driving cars, right? People at driverless cars. So what? If you're going to be on the road with a human driver and an autonomous vehicle, the problem is the humans in the cars. Okay. Yeah. I have been advocating forever that autonomous vehicles, in order to maximize their safety and their utility and their efficiency, and to get to what you were saying, oh, soon enough, we'll just be able to have the car drive us to work and we can just chill and do whatever. Not going to happen until we have separate lanes for driverless vehicles, where these driverless vehicles are talking to each other and they're communicating with our infrastructure and they're communicating with everything around us. And you don't even have to worry about other human beings. I am working on some very interesting projects right here in California. I mean, one of them has been publicly announced for the San Jose airport, where there's some kind of rendition of what I have been advocating for the last 8 to 10 years, which are these autonomous pods that are going to be gap fillers, where these autonomous pods, driverless pods, rubber vehicle, and they can go to various spots along this designated lane of 3.4 miles, right? That's going to be the future, in my opinion. That is the way autonomous vehicles are going to start to transform our society, is when we have the proper infrastructure in order to maximize their use. I hope that answered your question.
It does, and it kind of confirms my gut that we're not ready. I have a Tesla, and even I feel as great as it drives on its own, quote on its own. It's just something about being in a car and you're not driving it. It's exhilarating because of the novelty of it. But ultimately, I only do that if I'm just, on the interstate. Other than that, I don't feel comfortable. And as you are sharing your vision for the only way to make this work, it's just a light bulb goes off, because I would feel comfortable in that environment, because it's not me. It's the other drivers who do crazy things, and then how that would play out.
One of my articles that's had a lot of evergreen qualities to it. It was the second article I ever wrote, and I really believe in this. Yes, it was a little bit tongue in cheek. Everything that I write is tongue in cheek because I have a wicked sense of humor. It's called Hollywood and Autonomous Vehicles: How Films, Cartoons, and TV Shows Have Shaped Our AV Biases. And in this article, I analyze very well-known films and some not very well-known films, and how that's had an impact on our fears of autonomous vehicles, and how we need to actually kind of get over those fears. Now, Waymo and up in San Francisco and here in LA and these robo-taxis, is that going to help us in trying to get over our fears of autonomous vehicles? Sure. But once again, a driverless car, or a car without it's literally just it doesn't mean anything. All they're doing is going to be taking away jobs from Uber drivers and people that need, typically immigrants. People come to this country, they drive cars that are good jobs for them. They're just going to take those jobs away from people. It's not going to change anything at all until we redo our infrastructure.
Well, like I said, these are very, very insightful comments you're making, and giving us a lot to think about. But as we wrap up, we kind of want to switch gears a little bit and bring it back to our modern family, our modern husband kind of theme, right? We know that, Rudy, you're a very modern husband yourself. And your wife is very accomplished. She's a doctor. And so how do you work together to manage your home, support each other's careers as a modern husband?
Yeah, great question. And I think I love what you guys do. And I love that you guys are talking about this. We try to talk a little bit about that on Good as in the Details, but you guys really hone in on it, and you do an excellent job about it. And your financial analysis is wonderful. And this type of podcast is exactly what men need to listen to.
Thank you.
I agree with you more.
We have help. We are fortunate enough to afford help. The real question, Dr. Bruce, is going to be, how do we manage that when our help eventually leaves us? Because she has told us that you are my last family. I'm no longer going to manage your home, because she manages our home. She doesn't, it's not just childcare. She literally manages a lot. Now, I do a lot. I have the more flexible job, right? I could do a lot from my smartphone. So how we manage it is, it's a combination of our house helper and me, shuffling the kids around and taking them to here to there and doing everything. And a lot of that falls upon me. And it's been able to work with help. And when our current help leaves us, do I think we're going to need to continue to have help? Absolutely. Thankfully, my wife's in-laws don't live too far away, so they help out, but they're getting up there in age, so we don't know how much we're going to be able to rely upon them. My parents are about an hour away. In an emergency, they can help us. But I feel no shame, and I don't think any woman or any man or any couple should feel any shame or any guilt whatsoever in saying we need help in order to help our careers. And we will continue to have some kind of help. Now, I believe that technology, there are companies out there that help out with commuting, and I think they're just going to get better. I think there's like one in particular called Hop Skip Go that helps out with kids commuting, and I do think that some kind of combination of ride sharing and better transit tech will help us out for like the commuting and shuffling kids around. I think we're able to live in a community where, our kids go to school here. They have most of the programs here. We're very lucky. If that should change, basically what I'm trying to say is right now, everything is working because we have help and everything works together. Ask me again in about 5 years how it's working. But no matter what, I will always be a modern husband. I will listen to your podcast and I will lean on you guys to help me in those times when I need help.
Well, Rudy, I'm glad that you brought that up, that the fact that, it's okay to outsource tasks. Yeah. And we've had other podcast guests like Dr. Williams, who's on our advisory board, and she's a world expert in time, money, and happiness. And she brought up the fact that it's okay to delegate tasks and outsource tasks. So as an example, I always mowed my lawn growing up. I mowed my parents' rental property lawns. I did it when we were married for a little bit. I don't do it anymore because I have other things that I can do where I can earn more income or be more beneficial around the house than mow the lawn. And you can go on and on with all of these different ways to outsource time that aren't necessarily entirely socially acceptable yet. Like some people, when you say, hey, I outsource, some childcare, or I outsource, having my lawn taken care of, some people will think, well, why don't you do it yourself? Well, do those same people not have dishwashers? Do those same people not have washers and dryers? I mean, it's just an evolution of our society, and we have to focus on what's most important to us, our family, what we love. And if mowing the lawn for an hour and a half every Saturday can be outsourced so you can go to a ball game with your kid or whatever, then that is money well spent. And I'm really thrilled that you brought that up and that you joined us today. You're a true modern husband. We want to know, before you take off, where can folks learn more about you and your podcast?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I really do appreciate this. If you could tell this particular topic, being a modern husband, transportation, the future, I'm very passionate about it. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. Really, it means a lot to me, and I will promote this, and I'll continue to listen to you guys. So thank you very much. People can find me, Rudy Solo, Forbes. I usually put out an article once every 2 months. I got to get better about that. I explain the reasons why I'm not. Good as in the Details podcast. That's you can get that literally on every podcast channel that's out there. On Twitter, it's Salo Rudy, so it's my last name and my first name. LinkedIn, I post a lot there. LinkedIn is where I really post a lot about the transportation stuff and my thoughts on transportation. And then Instagram, I'm on Instagram as well. It's RudySS77. And I have a link tree. So like if you click on any of my socials, you can click on the link tree. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. It has like my Forbes links, my acting links, my podcast links, and a whole bunch of stuff there. So that's probably the best place, is my link tree. But if you like to hear my thoughts on things like this, if you want to listen to them, Good as in the Details podcast or Rudy Solo Forbes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It has been wonderful speaking to you both.
A special thanks to our guests and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast. Give us a rating and share our podcast with others. And check out our website at modernhusbands.com, where you can find articles, courses, toolkits, and other resources to help you and your partner manage money in the home as a team. Until next time, be well.